everyone. I am so glad that I see so many of you logging in right now. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us today. I know you guys have a lot on your plates. You are nonprofit fundraisers, and that means that you have a lot of hats that you wear at your job, and you are probably having to do a lot of scrambling right now to adjust to the current situation in the world. And so I always appreciate it when you all tune in to these QGIVE webinars and learn, but I especially appreciate it today. Thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us. If you all aren't familiar with me, my name is Abby Jarvis. I'm part of the team over at QGIVE, and we're a nonprofit fundraising platform, and our whole mission in life is to help you raise money. And a lot of that is, of course, wrapped up in the products that we have, but it's also why we have these webinars and why we do things like generational giving studies. We want you to be able to raise more money no matter what you're doing, and we think that education is a really important part of that. If you are a QGIVE client, and I see some of you on here that are, and you have any questions about how you can use your QGIVE account to do some of what I'm going to show you today, feel free to let me know. And if I can't get you the right answer, I can at least get you to someone who can. And if you don't use QGIVE today, no worries. Everything we're going to go over will apply to you too, and you will leave with just as much knowledge as anybody else. A couple of things just before we really get started. As always, we are recording this webinar, and you're going to get a copy of this webinar in your email inbox probably tomorrow morning based on how cooperative YouTube is being today. They have not loved uploading videos lately. I also wanted to let you know that there is going to be time at the end of this presentation for questions. So if you have any questions at all, drop them in the questions box that you see over there. And I will go through those at the end and answer as many questions as I can. And then I also wanted to let you all know, if you are really interested in generational giving and generational patterns and preferences and you want to talk about it more, we are having a Twitter chat on this topic tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. The QGIVE team and some other nonprofit leaders are going to be hanging out on Twitter, talking about some of the cool stuff we've discovered during the study that we're going to review today, and then talking about how you can apply that to your own fundraising. So all those are good things to have in mind right before we dive into what we all got together today to talk about. And it's really looking at generational giving patterns and preferences and what your donors want from you and how you can give it to them. Before I kind of get into the meat of the study, I did want to look at the number one question I was trying to help answer when we started this study. And it's important to kind of be able to contextualize what we're going to talk about today and understand why these generational preferences and understanding them is so important. So there are two main reasons these are really important patterns and preferences to understand. One, understanding what your donors want from you and understanding how to talk to your donors is going to help you be a more sustainable nonprofit. One thing we have noticed at QGIVE, especially over the last year and a half, overall philanthropic dollars are up, which is wonderful. That makes it easier for you to reach your goals. One thing that maybe is less optimistic, I guess, is that while charitable giving is up, gifts from individual donors are down. So that means more of your money is coming from fewer people. And in the immediate short term, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does put you a little bit at risk if you lose one of those major donations. So you may have heard me talk in the past about something called a dependency quotient. The nonprofit's dependency quotient really looks at how many donors you depend upon for your funding. So if you have a large donor base that all contributes pretty evenly to your overall revenue, you're in pretty good shape. If you lose a donor or two, it won't be the end of the world. But if most of your funding comes from 4 or 5 major donors and not really from any individual donors, losing 1 or 2 of those donors could be devastating. So one thing we want to help mitigate by understanding different generations' preferences is that level of risk. So today I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can apply different generations' communication preferences to build your donor base and reduce that risk. The other one, of course, is one of my favorite topics to get excited about, which is donor retention. Right now, the donor retention rate for the whole nonprofit industry is around 45%. So if you're like most nonprofits in this space, you lose more than half of your new donors every year. And that can be a real problem. You put a ton of time and effort and money into recruiting new donors. And when you lose those donors, you just have to spend even more to make up that lost ground. So understanding what your donors really want from their relationship with you will help you keep the donors you attract in the first place. So those are the two big problems we want to solve for understanding generational giving preferences. And this is how the understanding preferences can help. We want you to be able to broaden your donor base and broaden your potential revenue streams. So if you do lose a donor or a grant, it's not as big a blow to your organization as it would be otherwise. We also want you to be able to spend less money on donor acquisition. You, of course, always want to be acquiring new donors. You don't want to stop that. But keeping your donors around is more cost efficient than constantly acquiring new ones. So these are the two problems we're looking to solve here. And that is why we launched our generational giving report. To give you a little more context about the people who are contributing to the data I'm about to show you, when we did this study, we launched the study in December of last year, and we sent a survey to 1,300 people of all ages and genders with the understanding that we only really wanted information from people who had made a gift within the last 12 months. So we really wanted their giving preferences to be fresh and at the forefront of their mind when they answered our question. Once we got all of that data, we grouped it by age and then looked at how different generations answered each question. And from there, we could do a lot of really cool research on how people wanted to actually interact with the nonprofits they support. So here's who answered. You'll notice that people ages 73 and older, people who we would typically call the greatest generation, didn't really answer. They only accounted for a little over 1% of people who answered. So we don't actually go much into the greatest generation and their preferences, largely because we didn't have enough data to be able to confidently tell you what those donors are looking for. Other than that, with the exception of the 35 to 54 age group, the Generation X age group, we had a pretty even split between these different generations. The largest group was baby boomers, which is really helpful for us because baby boomers right now give the largest percentage of all charitable dollars of all the generations. So being able to really understand what they're looking for is really valuable. We did discover that there are some similarities that kind of crossed all generations. So this is also going to give you a really good insight into who is actually answering this survey. So the average donor across all generations gave between $5 and $55. So these people are going to be your lower level donors, people who have the potential to be mid-level donors, and the people who could be large major gifts donors but are really starting to just feel out your organization. Most of them across all generations gave between $100 and $500 a year. So again, we're not looking at major donors right now, we're looking at moderate donors. One thing that was really interesting to me, the largest group from each generation had given long-term support to a nonprofit, and most of people also had stopped long-term support of a nonprofit. So this shows us that the majority of people we talked to not only made a single charitable gift within the last 12 months, they had had an ongoing relationship with a nonprofit, and at some point they ended a relationship with a nonprofit. So we knew we would get some good data from these people. If you are interested in understanding maybe the kinds of generations that support your particular nonprofit and your mission, you might like this graph a lot. We looked at the top 3 kind of industry verticals that different generations supported. One thing I think is really interesting is that the baby boomer generation is far and away the generation that is most likely to support religious causes. They're also really invested in health and human services, which I really enjoyed. I loved to see too that Generation X and Generation Z both support environment conservation and wildlife and arts, culture, and the humanities. So those are the top 2 for each. And then I thought it was really interesting that the millennial generation really favored research and public policy and then international affairs. That was not something that I really expected to see. So this is split up by generation, the generations that, or the verticals that each generation is most likely to support. So with these things in mind, I want to get into the actual different generations. So we looked first at the baby boomers. We named our baby boomers Ronald and Judy, and we learned some really cool things about Ronald and Judy. So we asked the people that we interviewed if they did any research into the nonprofits they support before making a gift. And baby boomers said yes. 45% of them did research first. Baby boomers are also, despite that 45%, the least likely to do research. The younger generations are much more likely to do research. And the big thing that baby boomers told us they wanted to see in a nonprofit they supported was that the nonprofit was well respected. And they try to establish whether or not an organization is well respected in a couple of different ways. The biggest thing we looked for was financial reports. And you'll kind of see that that's an important trend for the baby boomers. They also did look at third-party evaluation sites. So sites like Charity Navigator, GuideStar, those are very important. So what they were really trying to do, they want to know that a nonprofit is well respected and that they use the money that they raise well. Ronald and Judy would be very put off and discouraged from making a donation if they saw that there was a lot of negative feedback from family and friends. And they also are put off by what they consider unreasonably high overhead. So several people in the survey called out not wanting to support an organization that spent a very small amount of their money on the actual mission. And they also said that they did pay special attention to CEO and president salaries. So those are some things to keep in mind if you're working on attracting baby boomer generation. When they give, baby boomers are really into direct mail. So 43% of the people who indicated that they're part of the baby boomer generation told us that they wanted to give through direct mail. So direct mail is 100% a valuable fundraising method. And what made me laugh was that 43% wanted to give through direct mail, but 44% wanted to donate with a physical check. I don't know where that split came from. I think some people wanted to give physical checks in person, but this group, when it comes to their actual donation preferences, are still very analog. Perhaps because many of them don't want to give online. A large percentage of people, about 50%, said that they would offset processing costs if they gave online, so giving an extra $1 or $2 to kind of offset the cost. But 50% said that they didn't really want to do that. So I thought that was an interesting split. Baby boomers have very specific preferences when it goes to the communications they receive from organizations after they make a gift. This is interesting. So 43% of baby boomers want to give to you in response to direct mail with a physical check, but 33% of them want an email receipt. So baby boomers are really a generation that want to mix digital and analog. A lot of them will want to send you a direct mail check, but they may want to get an email receipt back. So you might want to give them the opportunity to indicate how they want to receive their receipt, just in case they are one of these people that want to get an email confirmation of a physical check. Only 25% of them want a receipt in the mail. So I thought that was interesting. One thing that we heard a lot from baby boomers is that they don't really want frequent updates. If they want them at all, they really only want them once a quarter or so, and they want those through direct mail. You can also send them through email. I think some of the younger baby boomers are a little more open to receiving nonprofit communications in email. But just as they did with their research, baby boomers really wanted to see financial reports that show how their money was used. So they wanted that you use their money wisely and want to see financial reports proving that you've used their money wisely. Now, the next generation is pretty different. So the next generation we looked at was Generation X. And you'll remember 45% of baby boomers research a nonprofit before they give. That number shoots up past 60% when you get into Generation X. While baby boomers, though, tend to look at financial information and third-party reviews to make sure they're giving to respected organizations, Generation X really wants to look at testimonials from two groups of people. One, they want testimonials from your clients and the people you help. So if you have helped a family deal with an illness, or you have helped match a family with an animal that is found their forever home, they want to see testimonials from those people, but they also want to hear testimonials from family and friends. So social proof is really, really important to Generation X. Perhaps because of that social proof preference, they will also check Google reviews, which I think is really interesting. They differentiated between third-party sites like GuideStar, Charity Navigator, and said that specifically that they would look at Google reviews. So that's interesting. If you want to work on building a donor base in the Generation X generation, start a little campaign to get people to review you on Google. That could really help. Generation X is the generation that is overwhelmingly turned off by outdated websites. So as you're building a campaign to get some Google reviews, you might want to look into giving your website a facelift. They're also put off by poor reviews on third-party sites. So if you have a ton of negative Google reviews, they're not going to be as willing to give you their money. So update your website and get some good reviews on Google, and Generation X will be much more likely to make a donation. When they give, this group is most likely to want to give to you through social media channels. So they're looking at your social media accounts. And Facebook is the one that we called out in particular, but you could also probably reach this group on Twitter as well. One thing that is another kind of surprising find for us is that 47% prefer to donate by transferring stock or other assets. So you may want to have a system in place for taking that kind of in-kind donation, or having a system set up where people can transfer stock to you. Another large percentage prefer to give by e-check. So having that direct deposit or direct withdrawal from their account is important. So if you are setting up an online donation form, this group may not want to give to you with their credit card. They may be more comfortable giving to you by e-check, which is great. The upside is that obviously it attracts Generation X donors. Another upside is that processing fees tend to be a little lower than processing fees associated with debit and credit cards. So that's a fun thing for you to file away. If they do give by card, this group is very likely to offset processing costs. So if you want to connect with these donors and you don't necessarily want to take e-checks, give them a way to offset the processing costs associated with their gift. One thing that was fascinating to me is that Generation X is very motivated by the tax deductibility of their gift. That is not something that motivates baby boomer donors, but Generation X is highly motivated by tax deductions. So you may want to call out, especially in your receipts, that any gift they give is tax deductible. And if you are sending a targeted appeal to people you know fall into the Generation X generation, you may want to call it out there as well. That is not, like I said, that's not the case with other generations, so I would be reluctant to put it on your primary donation form, but consider including some language around tax deductibility and maybe some of your appeals. A full half of this group wants email receipts, and they want them immediately. So if you want to appeal to Generation X donors, try setting up an automatic email reply when someone gives a gift. They will really appreciate it. They do want to hear from you a little more frequently than their baby boomer counterparts. So still, they prefer quarterly updates like their baby boomer counterparts, but about a quarter of them want to see monthly updates. And they are really interested in understanding how their gift was used. So they're not necessarily looking for financial reports, although they'll certainly appreciate them. They're really looking more for stories or testimonials, like we talked about a couple slides ago. One thing that you can do if you really want to knock the socks off your Generation X donors is give them a quick phone call, letting them know how their gift was used. That is something that you'll see in the other generations as well. Personal phone calls are actually really popular with younger donors. So if you really want to just blow someone away, give them a phone call. The other thing that I found kind of interesting is that Generation X donors are the donors that are most likely to participate in a peer-to-peer event. So 82 of them said that they would get involved by raising money for you and asking their friends and family to donate. I thought when we launched this survey that the younger donors, the Millennials and Gen Z kids, would be most interested in doing that, and I was wrong. Generation X are going to be your most enthusiastic peer-to-peer participants. So if you're looking to engage them other ways, that's a really good option. I am sure you guys have seen or read countless thought pieces on how to engage millennials. So I hope you are excited about this data. 66% of millennials actually do research into a nonprofit before they give. That surprised me. I am a millennial, and I have heard over and over again that millennials are emotional and they want just warm fuzzies and then they'll donate to you. And we learned that at least with the 1,300 people we interviewed, that's not necessarily the case. Yes, people in the millennial group are emotional and they want to make the world a better place, but they're also going to research you before they make a gift. Where they're going to look varies a little bit, but as a general rule, they're going to look at your social media channels first, even before your website. And what they're going to look for there are updates about what you've been doing and how donors have been able to help you do that by supporting your charity. And they want to see testimonials, both from your friends and from the people you've helped. And because social media is going to be the very first place they look, they are very put off by poor social media presence. And if you don't update your social media regularly, so inconsistent communications are really going to throw them off. So when you are building a social media plan, especially if you want to appeal to millennials, maybe pick 1 or 2 social media channels and really do a solid job of updating those. It is better to have 1 or 2 very active channels than it is to have 3 or more inactive channels. So you don't have to be on Twitter, you don't have to be on Instagram. If you do decide that you want to explore those channels, it's important to keep them active because millennials will be suspicious if they're not. This is the group that is most likely to donate to you by text. So almost a third of millennials said that they wanted to give by text or by app. So if you are really looking to make a push for your millennial donors, explore trying a text keyword or using an app. QGIV users, we have Givey that is automatically part of your account. So it is a tool you already have handy. 28%, so a little over a quarter of millennials want to give to you with a digital payment system. So PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Wallet, any of those digital payment systems are going to be popular with them. And 27% want to give by e-check. So explore having those as an option on your donation form, or if you are running an event, look maybe for those square readers that people can tap their phone to or use Apple Pay or Google Wallet. Those are your millennials' favorite donation methods. They are kind of motivated by tax deductibility. When we asked them if they were motivated by their tax deductions, most of them said that it was like kind of a nice perk to have, that it wasn't really important to them. So you don't need to emphasize that with millennials like you do with their Generation X friends. This group is also very likely to offset their processing costs. So please, if you have the ability to do so, enable that on your donation form. One, it makes people feel good because they feel like they're helping you a little more. And two, it means that more money goes directly to you. So it's a really great option that a lot of generations want. This group too prefers an email receipt, which is not surprising given that they want to donate digitally. They are a little more generous with their time than Gen X. They would like to have their receipt within 24 hours, whereas Gen X, remember, wants it immediately. And like Gen X, they want to see updates quarterly or monthly. So we'll see, again, they're moving a little more toward the more frequent updates. When millennials want updates, they really want story-based follow-ups. And they're gonna look for those stories on social media, but like Gen X, they appreciate personal phone calls. You may have heard me tell the story before on one of these webinars, but one of our staff at QGIve is a millennial, made a gift to a charity and got a call from the CEO, I think 24 or 48 hours later, and everyone in QGIve knew about it because that is something that resonates with us so much. So if you really want, again, to knock someone's socks off, give us a quick call. We'd be really excited to hear from you. Now we're going to dig into the youngest set of donors, Generation Z. And before I get really into this group, I did want to clarify something. When we interviewed Generation Z, we only interviewed Gen Z donors who are older than the age of 18. So 18 or up, that's who we surveyed. So this group of donors represents what is probably a small portion of Generation Z. A lot of Gen Z donors are younger than 18, and due to privacy laws, we cannot talk to them. The thing to take away here, though, is that all of Generation Z, including younger kids, are very philanthropically minded. I don't know if philanthropically is a word, it is now. People actually call this group philanthro kids sometimes instead of Generation Z. At QGIve, we call them Zoomers, mostly because the Gen Z employees at QGIve call themselves Zoomers. So that's what I'll say. Like their older counterparts, the majority of Zoomers are going to do some research. The number, 57% there, is a little lower than the older generations. But the big takeaway is that they are looking. They are very inspired by stories from the people that they're going to help. So Gen Z or not Gen Z, Gen X and Millennials want to hear testimonials. Gen Z wants a little more than that. They want actual stories from the people they're going to help. But like the two older generations, the first place they're going to look is social media. If you're looking for a way to reach the largest number of donors, Generation Z, X, and Millennials are all on social media. This group is the only generation that said that they would look at local media before deciding to give. So if you have any media contacts and can spread stories about what you're doing through local media, it's a great way to get attention from younger donors. The things that will dissuade a Zoomer from donating is kind of a fun mix between the Millennial and Gen X donors. They don't like bad social media presence like Millennials, but they also are really put off by outdated sites, which is not something that dissuades Millennials, but it does turn off Gen X. But still, here, about a third of them prefer to go through social media channels. Social media remains important. I will say that a lot of us were kind of giggling over the Generation Z's preferred giving types. So 41% of them said that stock or asset transfer was a preferred donation method. I can't imagine that a 19-year-old kid is doing a lot of stock transfers, but we did think that maybe an asset transfer was something along the lines of in-kind donations. So maybe a Gen Z kid can't give you the deed to a piece of property, but maybe they can give you in-kind donations of canned goods or clothing. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to sit down with some of the people that we interviewed, but we thought that was really funny and interesting. And about a third of them said they prefer digital currencies like Bitcoin. I don't know how many Gen Z kids are getting Bitcoin, but I did think that was interesting in that it gave us a solid understanding that these kids are, they're true digital natives, they want to give digitally, and they are at least interested in digital currencies. Like millennials, they're kind of motivated by tax deductibility. They said that it's kind of a nice perk, but they don't really think about it when they're giving. And like the other two generations, they are very likely to offset their processing fees. So please enable that option if you haven't already. No surprise, they like email receipts. They are even more generous with their time. They want their receipt within 48 hours. So they're the most chill of the groups. They do want to hear from you more frequently than other generations, though. They are generally going to be looking for updates around once a month. And like the appeals, they are going to be looking for stories about the people they help more than they'll look for financial reports or testimonials. Like millennials, though, they want to see updates on social media. They would love phone calls. If you are kind of like me and are scratching your head about why all of these people want phone calls, we kind of sat around and talked about it and discovered that a lot of us feel that we get tons of marketing text messages and marketing emails and ads on Facebook and social media, but really getting that personal call is kind of a big deal. We don't get those anymore. I can't remember the last time I answered a phone call that wasn't my mom or dad or husband. So take advantage of those personal phone calls. If you have some downtime, you could really make a huge impression. So the next thing I want to look at, so I just threw all that information at you. I want to look at how you can actually give your donors what they want. You saw all kinds of different opinions and preferences. So here are 3 simple steps you can take to give everybody what they're looking for. The big thing you can do is to update your social channels and your website and then keep them active. So that will cover almost every generation that we looked at and make sure that they're happy and comfortable giving to you. When you're looking at appealing to your baby boomer donors, which is especially important, remember, because they are going to give you the most money of all the generations, start with sending quarterly direct mail updates and then adjust if you need to. Everybody's donor base is a little different. Listen to what your baby boomer donors are telling you about what they want and adjust that way. But really the best thing you can do if you want to know what your donors want is ask. We really, really love when we see nonprofits send out donor surveys because it is the most reliable way to know exactly what your donor base is looking for. There are all kinds of free tools you can use to survey your donors. You can use SurveyMonkey, and I mean, that's the one I see most often. But if you want to know what they want, just ask. They'll tell you and be specific about it. Speaking of specificity, I really want to look at donor attrition with you. The reason this is so important, I mean, aside from the fact that we want to use this information to retain our donors, is that the majority of each generation we interviewed said that at some point they had given repeated support to a nonprofit and then ended that relationship. And we wanted to understand why, because having a majority of anybody say that is kind of scary. So let's look at what they told us. We pulled the 3 top reasons that each generation said they stopped giving support. And I'll give you a minute to kind of look over this, but I'm going to show you some really interesting patterns in these attrition notes, and then look at how we can overcome these problems. So one thing that struck me immediately was that each generation at some point and in some form said that they stopped giving because they didn't know if their money was being used to make a difference. And that is interesting because it is something that we can really easily address by changing the information we give our donors. So Boomers said they didn't think their money was used wisely. So did Generation X. Millennials said that they felt their donation didn't matter, and Gen Z said that they never received an impact update. So the fact that all generations are telling us that they have stopped giving because they weren't sure their money is making a difference is really important to understand. The more we can show our donors that the money they give is being used well, the more likely they will be to continue to give. So send baby boomers what they want, send them testimonials and show them financial reports, maybe do an impact report at the end of the year. Do the same with your Gen X donors who are worried that their money isn't being used wisely. Make Millennials and Generation Z donors feel that the donation they gave you was important and made a demonstrable impact. That's how you're going to keep these donors. The other pattern we noticed that was really interesting is that each generation also noted that one of their reasons for stopping their support had to do with how they were asked for gifts. So baby boomers said they felt like they were being asked for donations too often, whereas the other three generations said that one of their top three reasons was they were never asked to give again. Now, I can't get into the nitty-gritty of this because we didn't get to ask a ton of follow-up questions, but I would suspect that since baby boomers are the ones who are most frequently receiving direct mail appeals, and the younger generations are not receiving direct mail appeals, I would ask if there are tons of appeals going out through direct mail, but not any specific asks on social media channels. So if you are seeing this kind of donor fatigue in baby boomers, and if you're not seeing younger donors re-engage with you after their first gift, take a look at where you're asking for money and where you aren't. And I would really look at if you are asking for direct mail too much or not asking on social media enough. I also did want to point out that the two youngest generations, the Millennials and Gen Z donors, stopped giving just because they couldn't afford it. And that really makes sense. I know a lot of the Generation Z donors we talked to are still in school, and a lot of Millennials are still struggling to get established in the workforce. So if you want to continue to engage these donors, even if they can't afford to give to you specifically, give them additional ways to get involved. You could ask them to volunteer with you. You could ask them to raise money through a peer-to-peer event, each of these generations, so that they are willing to do that. Whatever you do, these people want to help you, and if they can't support you financially, give them a couple of ways to support you without giving you actual dollars. So again, this all begs the question, cool, everybody has different reasons for not donating anymore. How do we give everybody what they want? The number one thing is really to make your donors feel like their gift mattered. So show them the difference they made. And if you're looking at older generations, Gen X and baby boomers, show them what they achieved and then maybe give them some financial documents to make them feel that their investment was a good one. I would also recommend tailoring your asks to your channels. So make a plan and make sure that on the one hand, baby boomers aren't being inundated with requests. They probably don't want an appeal every month. But also make sure that other generations are actually getting appeals for donations. I know it can feel kind of awkward sometimes to make a concerted or like a specific appeal on social media, but these generations are telling you social media is the #1 place they look for information, and they're not being asked to give. So don't be scared to ask on social media. And then help younger donors support you if they can't actually, I was going to say write you a check, but they don't do that. So write you an e-check. Give them ways to get involved. Help them be brand ambassadors for your organization. Encourage them to participate in peer-to-peer events. Give them volunteering opportunities. Do whatever you can do to make them feel like they're making a difference, even if they can't do that with actual dollars. I'm also going to get a little bit into Giving Tuesday. I know it is only May, but since we know that a lot of people start researching that organizations are going to get support during the holidays, during the summer, this is an important thing to understand. So just as a little bit of background, a couple years ago, there was a study that came out that said that donors start researching the nonprofits they want to support for year-end donations in July. So it's time to think about that already. We asked people, everybody who answered the survey, if they had given during the 2019 Giving Tuesday. I wish we had results now, asking people if they had given during the recent Giving Tuesday now, but alas, we did this survey in December. So here's how all of the survey respondents applied. 28% said that yes, they had made a gift, which I thought was pretty fantastic. 38% said they didn't. Only 34% said that they weren't actually familiar with Giving Tuesday at all. So it's a pretty great awareness rate. So I'm going to look a little bit at how you can get different individuals and different generations engaged. So 17% of the baby boomers that we surveyed donated, and only 38% of them weren't aware of Giving Tuesday. So that means that more than 60% of them know what Giving Tuesday is. So we want to boost that engagement rate. So try doing these things. We know that these donors generally want to give by physical check through the mail. So try sending a Giving Tuesday appeal through the mail. You may try to get really creative with timing if you're good at that. I'm not. And send out a appeal so that they get it on Giving Tuesday, or maybe send it out a little before that so you get their checks on Giving Tuesday. You're the professional when it comes to timing mail, and it's not a gift I have. I'm sure you'll know how to do it. We also know that this group is likely to give on a recurring basis, but they also indicated that they will give if you have an urgent need. So show them that urgent need when you make this appeal. And then if you're sending a direct mail appeal, include a remit slip. We always recommend a full page remit slip because trying to write your address on a 2-inch line is a pain in the butt. And we also recommend sending a self-addressed stamped envelope. The easier you make it, the easier you make donating, the more likely people are to give. So make it real easy for your donors to give. A full third of Generation X donors made a gift on Giving Tuesday, which is phenomenal. More than 70% of them are aware of Giving Tuesday and what it is. So if you want to boost engagement in this group, we recommend sending emails that are full of testimonials and personal stories. And to really get all of the groups, all of the generations engaged in those emails, include stories and testimonials from both clients and donors. Make it really easy to give. Send immediate receipts. Gen X really wants those immediate receipts, but building them out also appeals to the Millennials and Zoomers who want email receipts too. This is the Millennial group. They are most aware of Giving Tuesday. They are the group that constituted the largest group of donors on this day. And what they're really looking for is active social media presence on Giving Tuesday itself. I would also recommend building some hype around Giving Tuesday on your social media channels leading up to Giving Tuesday as well. They want to see lots of pictures and lots of stories from the people that they're actually going to help. And then remember, this group is very enthusiastic about donating by text. So if you have a text keyword, get that set up for Giving Tuesday, make it available to Millennial donors. They really appreciate that option. Zoomers are a little bit smaller than Gen X. They do still have more than half of their generation aware of Giving Tuesday and what it is. If you really want to engage this group, there are a couple of options. One, make sure you share with them the impact their gift will make. Very similar to Millennials and Gen X, you can share testimonials and stories and pictures. Just communicate that they can make a difference. You may want to explore text to donate keyword for this group. The other thing you might want to do is explore outbound texting from this group. I don't have the particular statistic in front of me right now, but we do know that this group in particular really loves getting updates and news by text message. So if you send out a text message or two on the day of Giving Tuesday, or maybe even a day or two before, well, they're very likely to engage with you there. And then, especially with this group, make sure you explain how they can help make a difference, even if they can't make a gift. We noticed in this particular age group that they are most likely to donate during periods of the year where school is not in session. And as a general rule, school is still in during Giving Tuesday. But if you can tell them how they can make a difference, even if they can't give a financial donation, they're going to be more likely to support you. Okay, so for 45 minutes, I've given you a ton of statistics, percentages, and recommendations. So I want to kind of bring it all back to the big picture and pull it out a little bit and look at the big takeaways today. The big one is that donors want to give to you. All people, or the majority of people from all generations, said that they had given ongoing support to a nonprofit. That's a pretty huge thing. Every generation is interested in supporting an organization that's special to them. What they want, though, is they want to know that their gift is making an impact, and they need that from you. They need you to show them, whether it's their financial support or financial reports or stories or testimonials or pictures or whatever it is. All of them want to know somehow that they're making a difference. One thing I did want to reiterate is while these generations do have different preferences that can be pretty nicely summarized, no two donor bases are the same. So you can use these data points and these findings to sketch out a communication plan, but test it and see what your donors are actually looking for. You may want to tweak your communications plan to appeal to more people. One thing I did want to emphasize too is that now is not the right time to totally ditch analog methods. Direct mail is still far and away the most highly preferred kind of communication channel for the baby boomer generation. And then everybody really loves getting phone calls. So if you're like me and you don't like talking on the phone, maybe it's time to like hype yourself up and talk to yourself in the mirror so you can talk on the phone, because everybody loves it. Social media is really important. 3 of the 4 generations cited it as one of the most important things to them. So stay active on social media, pick 1 or 2 channels that you just knock out of the park, and then if you want to expand from there, you totally can. And then the number 1 thing to tell yourself is that donors are more similar than you think. They have different communication preferences, they have different giving preferences, but it all boils down to showing them that they matter, showing them that their gift matters, and showing them that the relationship they have with your nonprofit is important to you. So to kind of reiterate that, I'm going to send you some additional resources after this webinar. You're going to get this recording, of course. You're going to get the slides. I'm also going to send you a copy of the study. I just shared 47 minutes of statistics with you. I only touched on kind of the high notes, so if you really want to dig in, you'll have that opportunity. I'll send you the super cool infographic that kind of sums up the preferences for each generation. I'm going to give you lots of other resources that you can use. And then, of course, I'm going to send you an invite to our next webinar. We actually have some really cool ones coming up, so I hope you'll join us for that. And now I'm going to take a look at the questions that you have. And I am so excited to see that we have a few. Someone asked me for a little bit of clarification and said the largest population was baby boomers. Did I mean millennials? That was pretty early in the presentation, and I just said that the largest group that responded to the webinar was baby boomers. I think at this point, millennials are the largest generation in terms of sheer numbers, but in terms of the group of people that responded to the survey, baby boomers were the big ones. Someone did point out that providing updates, making additional asks is highly dependent upon getting permission from donors to add them to a mailing list. And that is totally correct. You don't want to spam people with your updates, even if you know they want them. So she said she's curious if generations are more likely to sign up for and stay subscribed to newsletters. Jamie, we didn't ask a specific question around would someone be willing or not willing to actually sign up for and stay subscribed to a newsletter. I would hazard a guess, though, that the answer would probably be baby boomers are Generation X. they are the generations that are most likely to look for email updates. I would guess that Generation Z and Millennials are going to be more likely to interact with you on social media, so they are probably less likely than some of the older groups to actually subscribe to your newsletter. If you are interested in building an initial email list to connect with donors, I would try putting a little opt-in checkbox on your donation form. So if anybody wants to donate, or if anybody wants to subscribe while they donate, they can do that. It is important though, if you have that on there, that you not have it pre-checked. People don't like having radio buttons that are pre-checked on forms. They think it's sneaky. So give them the opportunity to opt in. Don't do it for them. And see what happens. Different donor bases do different things, so it's just a guess from me. Some key questions. This is a great question from Tina. She asked, what key questions should be included in the donor survey? Should you ask about passion or interest, communication styles? I'm going to speak purely from personal experience and the donor surveys that I filled out. So some key things that I would suggest putting on there is, one, of course, asking people how they want to be communicated with and how frequently they want to be communicated with. But I would caution you only to include that if you can actually follow through on someone's preferences. So if I said that I wanted to hear from you through a monthly newsletter, but you don't send a monthly newsletter, that would be frustrating for me. Similarly, if I was a baby boomer and I said I only wanted to get direct mail updates once a quarter, and I got direct mail updates every month, I would be frustrated there too. So communication preferences is one. I would ask them maybe what drew them to your organization. So any kind of question you can use to get a grasp of what messaging you're putting out there that inspires donors to get involved is valuable. So if you have someone tell you that they were really moved by a specific campaign, you can try to emulate that campaign in the future. If someone says that they are giving to you because they had a personal experience with, say, you're a homeless shelter, if they had a personal experience with homelessness and now they want to give back because they were helped, that's really valuable information because you can kind of speak to that. So you might also want to know how they found out about you. So if you're running multiple marketing campaigns, you may get some insight into what's working. So I would try to get a feel for what donors want out of you, why they want to support you, how they learned about you, and then kind of build from there. Someone asked, Vicki asked, if baby boomers enjoy giving by check, how would you go about creating a sustaining member category? Which is a phenomenal question, Vicki. I'm so glad you asked that. So what I would do, and again, this might be different for your particular donor base. These sustaining people are often giving by check on a sustaining basis. So one of my friends at a local nonprofit here said that she actually has donors who have sent her a $50 check every month for years and years, and they have done so long that she doesn't actually know how to get a hold of them because they've just always kind of been there. So don't discredit that. That's totally possible. Another thing you may want to do if you notice that a baby boomer donor in particular is regularly responding to your direct mail appeals, try calling them, getting to know a little bit about them, asking why they have been giving to you so loyally, and then maybe invite them to give on a recurring basis, maybe online. Some of them are very willing to do that. And if not, if they prefer to just continue giving by check, you can still call them out as a sustaining member. So I would kind of start there and then see what they actually tell you. The last big question we have is one of my absolute super favorites from Ashley. She asked, what are some ways to engage young donors who aren't able to give dollars at this time? And I am so thankful you asked that. Okay, so I'm going to talk to a few different age groups. So on the one hand, I'm a millennial. Um, I know what it's like for a lot of us who are facing our second big economic crisis since we graduated college. So there are a few different things we can do. One, I would ask us to volunteer, and the more specific you can be in your volunteer requests, the better. So an example of how you can be specific in asking for volunteer help. A friend of mine who is the CEO for a nonprofit here in my hometown said that specifically right now, because of the COVID-19 crisis, they can't actually have donors on site or volunteers on site, which is a big deal for them because they're a volunteer-run organization. So what she said she needed instead was cards and notes of appreciation for the people who are going on site and working. So she gave us a specific need that they had and then told us how to solve it. So if someone can't write a check, they can probably write an encouraging card and drop that off. So giving people the opportunity to give their time is really important. Some of us may also want to donate in-kind donations. So again, like one of your Gen Z donors might not have 50 bucks to send you, but if you need dog food for your animal shelter, or if you have something on your Amazon wish list that maybe they could buy for you, or if you need canned goods, they could add some extra stuff to their cart the next time they go to the grocery store. That's really helpful. One thing I would also encourage you to look into, if you have the time and the resources, and that's an important caveat, try giving your supporters who can't support you financially the opportunity to raise awareness about your work and encourage other people to donate. I don't know if you have ever given to like Indiegogo or Kickstarter or something like that, but often they will tell you after you make a gift that if you share a campaign, the campaign will raise more money. And it's the same concept when you ask people to advocate for you. So my 19-year-old cousin might not be able to make a donation, but she could post your campaign to her Facebook account and get that campaign in front of more people. If you really wanted to get like creative, you could build a peer-to-peer campaign that gives them a personalized page that they can send out and ask people for donations. That's a fun way to get involved if you're a younger donor, but that does take a lot of time and resources from your staff. So only do that if you can. So I think those are some of the big things you can do. Ask people to volunteer for you and tell them what you need them to do, because it's frustrating for you and for them if a bunch of people show up and volunteer and you don't have anything for them to do. Ask them for in-kind donations and then get them involved in sharing your mission with other people. They may not be able to give you money, but they can give you their time and access to their social networks, and those are really valuable. Those are all the questions we have, and that is perfect timing. You guys are, one, very engaged and conversational, which I love. But if you do have additional questions, like I said, we do have a Twitter chat going on tomorrow. So if you are a Twitter fan or a Twitter user, you can go over to @QGive at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about this. You can ask more questions there. You'll also get an email from me tomorrow morning with more resources about this topic and a copy of the study and a bunch of other stuff. You can always reply to that email and just ask me yourself if you have any questions. You can also look over at the QGive blog. We have a ton of information about takeaways from the study. So Amanda asked, how soon will you be emailing things from today? Unless YouTube has a fit, which it has done recently, that should go out tomorrow. So if it doesn't go out tomorrow, it will go out Monday at the very latest. All right, everybody, that is it for today. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for asking questions. I will talk to you, like I said, tomorrow or Monday. In the meantime, have a great day. You've almost made it to the weekend. I hope you get some rest. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. Let us know if we can help. In the meantime, have a great day. I will talk to you all later.